Ba-na-nut, da-na-nut, and welcome back to Balancing Unhinged. My name is Amber Shah. I'm the Shah of Saint Augustine, and today I have a very special guest for you. And I wanted to introduce you to my good friend, Frederick Douglass. We actually just met today, and I didn't know that I could find him here because I never was given the address. Did you know Frederick Douglass is now available for your viewing pleasure in St. Augustine, Florida? And you can come and hang out with him and you can read the Emancipation Proclamation. Did you know about St. Augustine's history with the emancipation of the slaves? You know, they say that it was a big place for the freedom, and I agree. And I think it's very interesting. It's a very interesting thing. Have you read any of the books that he wrote? He wrote 3 different autobiographies about what it was like to live in slavery, right? And it's amazing. There's another book, and I just got it. It's called A People's History of the United States, and you should get that book. It's really interesting stuff, what they write about, and they tell you what happened to people a long time ago and all that good stuff. And I'm going to sit with him over here. Hopefully you can see us and hear us. And this guy, he was installed here just about a week ago. And I just read about it. So this is one book he's holding called My Bondage and My Freedom. Did you know he was able to buy his own freedom for a little over $700? That's how much it cost for him to free himself when he was in his 20s or something like that. So he was a slave for the first 25 plus years of his life. I think he was born in 1818. So he's one of the most important abolitionists from the 19th century, from the 1800s. So I think we all know Martin Luther the King, right? Jr., and we should all know Frederick Douglass. So he was involved with the Emancipation Proclamation. Who else was involved with that? I think a lot of us know the guy that was on the $5 bill, or still is, or whatever, if anybody carries cash. Lincoln, right? He's also on the penny. Frederick Douglass should be on something somewhere. Who knows? Maybe he's on the Maryland quarter, because he was born in Maryland, and he passed away in Washington, D.C., but he spent a lot of time in New Bedford, Massachusetts is actually where he was able to free himself in the 1800s from another slave owner. Somebody owed him in the 1800s, 1830s. It's Bike Week here in Daytona Beach, Florida, just about an hour away. So I don't know if you can hear the rumbling in the background there. But we've got Bike Week and we've got Frederick Douglass. And it was really interesting because I was reading some articles about this installation that they put here. And I thought it was really interesting because people were like against it. And it was like, dude, what the fuck do you care? Honestly. Anyways, did you know, and I've talked about this before on my TikTok, but there was a statue of a hunged slave, ex-slave, whatever, some guy that got hung downtown. There was a statue of him downtown. They removed that statue of that guy. I want to say his name was Barrett. His last name was Barrett, perhaps. I have that on my TikTok. You can go check it out. But anyways, so, I enjoy history. You know, I wouldn't really consider myself a history buff, right? But I think that there's a saying, if you don't study your history, you're bound to repeat it, or something like that. If you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it, or if you don't care about history, honestly. So that's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering why people are causing any kind of fuss at all. Anyways, so this is state property. You can't do shit about what they decide to put here. So congratulations on causing your fuss and just making it known that you're a weirdo, to me at least. So, but I'll tell you, like, I'm a child of the world. I don't believe, just like Mr. Frederick Douglass said, people shouldn't own people, okay? That's what he said, and I believe that. So did you know that in Europe, they used to have slaves, and they used to call people, like, indentured servants, right? Which was basically the same thing. And if you ask me why, I'll tell you why. And it's, for me, and I consider it the same thing, because indentured servitude is like when you live on someone's land, but then you have to work it, okay? So what did the slaves do? They lived on the land and then they had to work it. So I grew up in Europe. So I spent like my elementary school years learning about European history, not American history, which is really interesting because when I came here and started learning about American history in like 5th grade or something like that, I thought it was so fucking crazy. I was like, I thought all that shit was illegal here. For real though, I grew up in Europe and they were like, you can't do that in America. And I get here and I'm like, dude, they are doing that. Like, it's all happening. Did you know? For real, though. So it's really interesting to hear about American history and then read this people's history of the United States and then see that people like this, Frederick Douglass, made some amazing history books about this exact kind of thing, you know, and how he went through this kind of thing. And other people that are going through stuff right now are writing about stuff that they went through. And if you go to school, they all teach you that you want to learn about perspective, right? You got to learn all the different reasons why people might have biases towards different things and whatnot, right? So you also have to learn about sources. Like, who are we listening to? Why are you listening to these sources, you know? And when you read a first-person account about somebody like Frederick Douglass, who a lot of people found respectable, you know, and found him very well-spoken and things like that, but he did speak about how the entire slavery enterprise, you know, kept people in a lower cognitive fortitude structure where they weren't allowed to think. Right? So he was taught how to read by his slave owner, his wife or daughter or woman that was in the house, and then she got in trouble for it. You know, she was actually then they found out and they told her not to do it anymore. So that's part of his story. You know, the history is they didn't want people to know. They didn't want you to know the knowledge. The knowledge is the power. You got to keep learning. You got to keep understanding. You keep reading about what other people are doing, and you have to understand why they did that. And when you understand why they did that and you see how it's not always really great, then you can also kind of put yourself into a new mindset where you can see how some things aren't right. And for some reason, I'm like, those things aren't legal in other places. Like, there's no way that these places are, you know, not third world countries are going to be allowed to do this. All right. Well, I'm like, honestly, like, I've traveled to all these different countries. Okay. They're way more developed. All right. Emotionally, legally, like around here, you hear about like some of these lawsuits. It's crazy. All right. I went to, you know, business school. You know what it is? Cover your ass school. You just learn about all these different lawsuits and why people got sued and people that got hurt and then people that had to pay a lot of money for it or people who had their businesses destroyed over it. And that's all they really care about, okay? And then you hear about people like this who had gotten threatened with their lives, you know, and in the balance almost every single day, right? And they still persevered and they still succeeded and they still got through it and they overcame it and they became a leader in it. And this guy, he actually lived, I think, like into his 60s or something. So, I mean, he lived a pretty good long life. I don't know. I did not see how he had passed away. So I'm not sure if he did get assassinated or something like that, if it was political. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was, honestly, or like even all the stress that they have to go through in that amount of time, okay? So, and that's why I'm here. I wanted to talk about, you know, all the stressors that we go through during our day and still being able to get the fuck through it and move on, okay? You got to be able to get into your fortitude and you have to be able to stand up for what you believe in, okay? I feel like that's very important and I'm trying to teach my kids that. And I think that Mr. Frederick Douglass was able to do that. And I think that a lot of people should stand up for what they believe in. And it's really, really interesting for him to be right here in St. Augustine because there were people that were against having him here, you know? And not only people against him having him here then, but having him here now. it's really interesting to see what people are willing to say out loud. And you know what I love about Facebook, and I say that kind of sarcastically, is the people posting anonymously. That's really funny. It's funny the things that they say anonymously when they don't know. It's almost like Reddit, right? Have you ever read the things that are put on Reddit? And people go on there and they just say all this craziness. I couldn't imagine. What do you think Frederick Douglass would say if he was on a Reddit post and he had to post about what was going on right now and what was going on in the world? There's so much craziness everywhere, but we know there is craziness everywhere. We do have to stand up for what we believe in right here, right now, where you are, especially within your community, okay? Because we have to spread love. We just had the Bohemian Festival on the weekend. I went on Sunday. It was the Saturday and Sunday. We wrapped up on Sunday with a drum circle, and we drummed for peace. And it was really great to drum for peace, just like how I had just joined the monks for the walk for peace. And Frederick Douglass is over here searching for nothing but peace. That's all he wants. And I think that it's a really fun place here in St. Augustine, but there is still some more love to be shown. And you know what's really interesting? We actually stand, and I don't know if I had mentioned this earlier, but for some reason they have Frederick Douglass over here on this spot in town called the Plaza de la Constitución. It's right across from the Ponce de Leon. He's right over there. But what I think is fascinating is that Frederick Douglass right here is staring at the old slave market. They call it the slave market. It's like the first, they used to trade slaves right there in that little gazebo, which I might walk through later, but you've probably seen pictures of it. But it's right at the head of the plaza here where we light the lights and everything. Now we just call it like the marketplace or whatever the fuck they want to call it. But it is the slave market. It is the oldest slave market. It goes down in the history books as the oldest slave market. So I'm sure that he was here because he wanted to shut this thing down. And I hope you know what? I think he did. He probably did have part of that. He did have a big part of shutting down this old slave market that we sit across from right now. And you know what? Not much goes on in there. Not much goes on in that old slave market anymore. Sometimes people pop up with some pop-up markets. I think you can rent space in there. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure it's cheap, actually. It's like $20 or something like that. And you get like a whole month. And then you get to put a little pop-up market in there if you want to. I remember the Dirty Hooker was in there. The Dirty Hooker, she was funny. She made like spoons, wooden spoons, and crocheted stuffs. Get it? Hooker? Like with the crochet. But so thank you so much, Frederick Douglass. I really appreciate you letting me hang out with you. I really enjoyed brushing up on my Frederick Douglass history earlier today before I started this show. I actually had a whole script printed out, but I left it in the car. But I remembered most of it. And Frederick Douglass was a great man. And a lot of people should be thankful for Frederick Douglass's bravery and his fortitude and his willingness to persevere and interest in the pursuit of knowledge. Because if he didn't, get the knowledge that he had, and if he didn't learn to read and write, then he wouldn't have been able to put forward these messages. In fact, did you know that his book got famous mostly actually in Europe, in England, where it was published for the second time? And that is my fun fact for today, Mr. Franklin. I'll tell you that you got famous in England. And he spent a few years in England, and that's where he was really able to get his message around. He didn't even make it to St. Augustine until late in the 1800s. So he, I think, passed away in we'll say 1888. I want to guess, right? 1891, something like that. And then he was in St. Augustine 1888. So he was in St. Augustine 1888, and then he was in Washington, D.C. when he passed away just a couple of years later. So he wasn't that old. Hopefully it wasn't assassination, but you can go ahead and comment below if you know specifically. And it's really fun. I'm really excited that there is no more debate about this statue here in St. Augustine. Hopefully our man Freddie D is here to stay and he can hang out with us for a little while longer. But this is state land right here, and Amber Shah, your real estate expert, is going to tell you that if the state puts something on their own land, there ain't nothing you can do about it, right? So we've got Frederick Douglass right here, downtown St. Augustine. We got Ponce de Leon right over yonder. Our lions were actually removed about a month ago, but they're going to be down for about 2 or 3 years down at this west end of the Lions Bridge. We still have the lions that are down on the east end on the island, but we're missing these ones that are over here for a couple of years while they're redoing our seawall. And that's it. So thank you so much, Frederick Douglass, again. I really enjoyed sitting with you. I'm glad I found him because I actually thought that he was on that other corner over there. And when I got to that other corner, there was another statue over there for the foot soldiers. There are some other foot soldiers over there, statue of some busts. I believe there are 4 female bust heads that are there for the foot soldiers. I believe I might have put that one on Instagram. So if you enjoyed this show, please go ahead, give it a like, give me a follow, share it with all your peeps that you think might want to have more information about Frederick Douglass or the Emancipation Proclamation or his book, My Bondage and My Freedom, or his other 2 books, or also any of his other books. So he had 3 autobiographies and then he had more books, okay? So 3 of them were autobiographies. And the other one was just like a regular ass book, or, more books, just like information and speeches, just a ton of speeches, right? So he was always writing down what he wanted to say because, a lot of lawyers do this. And I heard also autistic people. But rehearsing what you want to say before you say it. And that's important anyways for public speaking. So there's also a part about that in my book, so go ahead and please pick up my book if you haven't already. Yoga in Sales is now available on Audible as read by yours truly. I do read kind of slow on there, so I do recommend speeding it up a couple of notches. Go ahead and do that. I like listening to books at around like a 1.5 speed, something like that. I did deliberately speak a little bit slowly on that because I wanted to really enunciate my words and whatnot so that it wasn't all smudged up and sounding like shit. So anyways, we'll be back down in St. Augustine next week, and we're going to go to the St. Augustine State Park because over there is a beautiful fort. It burnt down a long time ago, but we'll talk about that later. And then check out some more of this beautiful St. Augustine history and awesome places to go that you should go when you're in St. Augustine. And when you're ready to move here, because this is such an amazing place. And one more thing actually about Mr. Frederick Douglass is he gave his most famous giant large speech here at the Opera House, which in St. Augustine is now actually Prohibition Kitchen, where I was just over there getting sloppy on Saturday. That's such a fun place to go for dinner, date, drinks, party. They host different people. Afro Man was there. I had an Afro Man concert at Prohibition Kitchen like a year ago. I think it was like Cinco de Mayo time, or Cinco de Cuatro, something like that. But anyways, so St. Augustine is so amazing. You should come check it out. And if you do have questions, comments, concerns about property in St. Augustine, I am your girl, the Shah of Saint Augustine, Amber Shah, your friendly realtor and interested person. I'm a person of interest here in St. Augustine. You can follow me on Facebook at the Shah of St. Augustine. You can subscribe here on YouTube or Spotify or any of those things for the Shah of St. Augustine, Amber Shah. I'll be here all day, all night until I'm ready to write an offer or do negotiations, in which case you won't be able to catch me. But yeah, that's it. I'll see you later. Bye.